Fake HOA cop slammed my cousin, then froze when Dad walked out in uniform. They thought we were weak because we didn't scream, because we didn't call the cops every time they threatened us, because we kept to ourselves and didn't hang flags or throw HOA cookouts. But they forgot something. My family's quiet isn't weakness. It's discipline. It's restraint. And that all changed the day a fake HOA cop shoved my cousin into the mud and called him a trespassing punk. Because my dad walked out of our front door in full military dress uniform, and what followed burned through this neighborhood like a wildfire. I was raised on 3 rules. Respect goes both ways. Stay calm until it's time to get loud. Never mistake silence for surrender. Our house sat at the far end of Wisteria Glen, a newly built, painfully landscaped suburban neighborhood that looked like someone copy-pasted it out of a housing development catalog. You know the kind: mailbox clusters, pastel siding, people who thought being on the HOA board meant they were one step below Congress. We weren't poor, but we weren't like the rest of them either. My dad, Colonel Michael Daniels, had served 4 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now retired, he walked with a slight limp but still stood like a statue. My mom was a nurse. My cousin Elijah had moved in with us after his mom passed 17. Smart, soft-spoken, and probably the only black kid in the neighborhood besides me. Wisteria Glen had a community watch that wasn't official law enforcement. It was self-appointed, white polo-wearing, clipboard-carrying retirees who'd probably failed the police academy or just watched too many cop shows. Lately, they'd started calling themselves the Neighborhood Enforcement Team, and they wore custom HOA patrol vests, black with yellow lettering, like something off a cheap Halloween rack. I didn't think much of it until they started targeting Elijah. It began with warnings taped to our front door: improper parking on driveway line, bike left in front yard unsupervised, lawn edging exceeds HOA visual standard. We laughed at first. Edging, really? But then the warnings got more aggressive. Then they started coming directly to the house. The one who showed up the most was a man named Rick Stanford, late 50s, built like a bulldog, always had dark sunglasses on, even on cloudy days. Rick didn't live on our block, but he seemed to appear out of nowhere anytime Elijah stepped outside. The final straw came on a Friday afternoon when I got home from my college classes and saw Elijah sitting on the front porch, his lip bleeding and his shirt muddy. "Who did this?" I asked. Heart thudding. He just shook his head. It was Rick. Said I looked suspicious. Said I was wandering too close to the perimeter fence. That's when I lost it. Dad didn't say much when I told him. He just nodded. Then, without a word, he walked into his bedroom. 20 minutes later, he came back out in full Army Class A uniform, the same one he wore to every burial he'd attended for fallen brothers. Not as casual, not as retired polo, full medals, service stripes, beret in hand. "Elijah," he said, "come with me." We walked down the block, me and Dad on either side of Elijah, like flanking guards. The air was tight, still. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, a few openly watching from their porches. Rick was standing with 2 other fake patrol guys near the community park gazebo, arms crossed like they owned the place. His eyes landed on us, then flicked to my dad's uniform. He stiffened. "You again," Rick said to Elijah. "I told you this area's off limits without adult supervision." That's when my father stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, didn't puff his chest, but he spoke like thunder. "This young man lives in my home. You have no authority over him or over this neighborhood." Rick blinked. "We're acting on HOA mandates. There is no legal mandate that authorizes assaulting a minor." Dad said. I could hear it, the shift. Rick's voice faltered. He glanced at the others beside him, suddenly unsure. "I didn't assault anyone," he muttered. Really, Dad's voice stayed steady. "Because we have ring footage. You pushed him. You put your hands on my nephew," Rick stammered. He was loitering. He was walking home. That moment was the crack in the dam. Neighbors started gathering. Phones came out. I saw one of the teenagers down the street already live streaming. Dad turned to the crowd. "How many of you have gotten warnings?" Fines letters that look official but aren't signed by anyone from city council. A few hands went up. One man muttered, "I got fined for having a flag." Another woman added, "They towed my car without notice." Dad nodded. This stops now. Back at home, we pulled up the neighborhood bylaws. Dad cross-referenced property lines, municipal records, and found what we all suspected: Rick and his team had zero legal backing. They weren't hired. They weren't elected. They were just a bunch of power-drunk neighbors cosplaying as police. But the story doesn't end there, because what we discovered next, that was only the beginning. The night after my dad confronted Rick in uniform, our porch light was shattered. No note, no warning, just broken glass on our welcome mat and a silence that said, "This isn't over." But my father wasn't the kind of man you scare off with darkness. By Saturday morning, we'd set up 2 cameras, one pointed at the street, the other at our driveway. Elijah was still shaken, but I could tell something else was burning inside him now. He wasn't just scared, he was angry, and he had every right to be. At breakfast, Dad pushed a folder across the table. "Here's everything we found last night," he said. "Start logging incidents, dates, times, photos, names." Elijah blinked. "What is this evidence?" Dad replied. "We're building a case." I leaned in and flipped through its screen captures of HOA warnings, posts from the fake patrol's private Facebook group thanks to a neighbor who snuck us in, and, most damning of all, HOA bylaws they'd printed themselves. Not city-approved documents, no official letterheads, just Word docs designed to look official. "They've been impersonating an HOA," I said aloud. "They're not even legit. They filed a shell incorporation 3 years ago." "That's it," Dad said, sipping his coffee. "They're not certified with the county. They've never filed a single annual report. It's fake authority." We decided to go public. Sunday morning. Dad wore his uniform again, not to intimidate, but because people listen when a man in uniform speaks. He stood on our porch while I live-streamed the speech. Elijah held the camera steady. "My name is Colonel Michael Daniels," he said. "I served this country for 28 years, and today I'm speaking as a father and a neighbor." People began gathering in the cul-de-sac. A few sat on lawn chairs. Some stayed behind fences, listening from a distance. But they listened. For months, a group of individuals in this neighborhood have been abusing their neighbors under the false authority of an HOA that doesn't exist. They've issued fines, made threats, towed cars, and most recently assaulted my nephew. Murmurs, gasps. A few people cursed under their breath. We have proof. We're taking this to the city. And if anyone else here has been harassed, I ask you to speak up. Within an hour, our inbox was full. A single mom fined $500 for unauthorized trampoline use. A couple whose rose bushes were dug up in the night. An elderly man forced to repaint his mailbox 3 times for noncompliance. Rick and his fake HOA goons had been running unchecked for over a year, and the city didn't know a thing about it. That week, we scheduled a meeting with the county clerk's office. It didn't take long for the truth to drop. Wisteria Glen had no officially recognized HOA. The developer had filed a provisional HOA back in 2019, but it was never activated. The paperwork was incomplete. No dues had ever been legally collected. Everything the HOA patrol had done, every fine, every threat, was fraud. It was worse than we thought. On Thursday, the tension snapped. I was walking back from the corner store with Elijah when Rick's pickup skidded to a stop across from us. He got out, red-faced, veins pulsing on his neck, wearing that ridiculous HOA patrol vest like it gave him power. "You've made a mistake," he growled. "All this crap you're stirring up, you're gonna regret it." "You assaulted a minor," I snapped. "The only one who should be worried is you." Rick stepped closer. "This neighborhood needs discipline, order. You want this place turning into some lawless zone." "You don't get to decide what order is," Elijah said quietly. "You don't get to slam people around just because they don't look like you." That's when Rick lost it. He grabbed Elijah by the collar again and shoved him against a fence. Before I could move, I heard a voice from behind me. "Step away from my son, Dad." And this time, He wasn't alone. Two officers from the sheriff's department were with him. They weren't smiling. "You're under investigation for impersonating an officer, criminal assault, and HOA fraud," one said, pulling out cuffs. Rick froze. "Wait, what, this is harassment I was just enforcing?" "You were pretending," the officer said coldly, "and you laid hands on a minor." Again, as they read him his rights, neighbors came out of their homes, filming, cheering, whispering. The spell Rick had cast was broken. But what came next was bigger. Because Rick wasn't acting alone, the arrest made headlines the next morning. Fake HOA cop arrested for assaulting teen. Investigation uncovers larger neighborhood scheme. But we knew this wasn't just about Rick. He was the muscle, the visible face of a deeper rot that had threaded itself through Wisteria Glen like ivy on an old fence. The city attorney called us directly. "I've never seen this many code violations stacked on one address," she said. "And it's not from the residents. It's from the so-called HOA board, which, as far as I can tell, doesn't exist." She asked us to come in. Dad brought the folder. I brought Elijah. What we found out in that downtown office blew the whole thing wide open. Turns out, the Wisteria Glen HOA had a website not registered through the city, but through a private firm in Arizona. The board was listed as President Karen M. Elliott, Vice President Richard Rick Kellerman, Treasurer Brett M. Elliott, Compliance Officer M. Stanton, no last name. None of them held legitimate office, but they had collected over $87,000 in fines from residents since the pandemic. Most of it was through PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle. No paper trail, no receipts, just stolen money. Elijah sat stiff in the chair as we read the documents aloud. He'd been quiet all morning, but I could see his jaw tightening with every page. Karen Elliott. That name made his hands curl into fists. She was the one who fined us for leaving trash bins out too early, who screamed when our little cousin rode her scooter past 9 p.m., who referred to Elijah as the renter's boy, even though my uncle owned the damn house. And now we knew she wasn't just bossy, she was running a scam. That evening, we hosted a community meeting on our lawn. Over 30 families showed up. Some stood, some brought folding chairs. All of them carried frustration. An elderly veteran named Mr. Dobbs told us he'd paid $1, $200 in landscaping non-compliance fees or faced foreclosure threats. A young couple said their dog had been taken by HOA Animal Control, which turned out to be Karen's nephew, with a borrowed uniform and a beat-up white van. It was like peeling layers off a rotting onion. But the most gut-wrenching story came from a woman named Shonda, a single black mother 2 streets over. She stepped up with tears in her eyes and said, "Karen told my son she'd call ICE on him if he didn't stop acting suspicious." My son is 11. He was riding his skateboard. The crowd gasped. One man swore loudly. That was it. No one wanted peace anymore. They wanted justice. The next step was risky but necessary. Dad contacted a few of his old military friends who worked cybersecurity. Within 48 hours, they traced the HOA's server back to Karen's husband's landscaping business website, the same business that had exclusive landscaping contracts with over 40 homes in our neighborhood. So that was the game. Create a fake HOA, enforce phony landscaping rules, fine people, then force them to hire your own company to correct the violations. It was extortion in broad daylight, and it was time to shut it down. We filed a full report with the city attorney's office. Dad sent a copy directly to the state's attorney general. We sent another to a local news channel. That same week, an investigative reporter showed up at our house. Her name was Lainey Cruz. She was sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, and exactly the kind of person you want on your side when the powerful are pretending to be something they're not. Lainey interviewed Elijah, Dad, me, and half the street. She dug into public records, subpoenaed business filings, and within a week had built a full expose. It aired the following Sunday. Title, "The HOA That Never Was a Suburban Scam, Unmasked." And then the backlash hit like thunder. Karen Elliott went into hiding. Her house was egged the next morning. Not that we condoned it, but no one really cried either. Her husband's landscaping business tanked overnight. Yelp reviews flooded in, all pointing back to the scam. Within a week, he'd taken down their website. The sheriff's department opened a full investigation. Karen was charged with fraud, impersonating a public official, harassment, conspiracy to commit extortion, unlawful restraint. Yes, she'd once locked a neighbor's kid in her garage for breaking HOA curfew. Rick's arrest was just the beginning. But here's the part that mattered most to me. Elijah finally smiled again. It happened when we walked past the park, the one Rick had banned him from for skateboarding noise. A few kids were there. They called out to him. He waved back. He looked taller that day, like he could breathe again. Feels different now. Huh, I said. He nodded. I don't feel scared anymore. For a week, it felt like the tide had turned. Karen was in hiding. Her husband had shut down his landscaping business, and Rick the enforcer was sitting in county lockup, staring down felony charges. The community had rallied, the news cycle had moved in our favor, and the fake HOA had been exposed for what it was, a scam run on fear and silence. But silence doesn't always mean surrender, and fear doesn't always die easy. It started with an envelope, no return address, just a thick manila envelope slid under our door late one night. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, all caps. Bold, your father isn't who you think he is. Ask him about Willowbend. Below it, a grainy black and white photo. It was of my dad, in uniform, standing next to a building that looked like a detention facility somewhere hot and dusty, maybe Iraq. He looked younger, harder. There were armed men in the background, detainees in the foreground. Elijah picked it up and stared at it too long. Willowbend, he asked. Dad took one look and went pale. That night, Dad sat us down. His voice was low, real low. I was stationed at Willowbend, he said. It was a temporary detention site overseas. Back during my third tour, there were some classified operations. Operations, Elijah asked. Interrogations, Dad said quietly. I looked at him, unsure. You were part of that. He didn't flinch. I stopped what I could, but I wasn't proud of what I saw. For the first time, I saw fear behind my father's eyes. Not the kind that makes you run, the kind that paralyzes you, the kind you bury for years. But Karen had dug it up. Somehow, the next morning, our mailbox was ripped off its post. Elijah's skateboard, his favorite one, custom painted, was snapped in half on our porch. Spray paint on the driveway. Rats get exposed. We called the sheriff. Again. But there were no cameras on that side of the house. That night, I checked our home security feed manually. That's when I saw it. Two silhouettes, both with hoods. One of them shorter, limping slightly. The other broad-shouldered. Moved like a soldier, but not trained. Like someone who wished he had that kind of control. I recognized the gait. It was Brett, Karen's brother, the compliance officer who disappeared when the news broke. He was back. By noon the next day, the smear campaign began. A brand new website appeared, WistariaTruth.org. It had one page. On it was a long rant accusing my dad of war crimes, accusing me of forging documents, and accusing Elijah of initiating violence against law enforcement, referring to him being tackled by Rick. They posted edited clips, took down context, claimed we were the criminals. And the worst part, some people believed it. I couldn't sleep. Neither could Elijah. He asked me straight up, what if they come back? What if they try again? I didn't have an answer, but Dad did. We don't run, he said. We expose them. Thoroughly. He pulled out a thick folder from his locked cabinet. Inside was everything, a full dossier on Karen's family. Old arrest records, business licenses, and then something wild, a purchase order. It showed that Karen had bought 2 security uniforms, a handheld taser, and a used police-style SUV from a retired government auction site. She had built this thing from the ground up, brick by fake brick. That night, Lainey Cruz, the reporter, came back. She was furious. They're accusing me of fabricating the story, she said. Even got a cease and desist. She showed us the email. The sender, Legal a Wisteria Glen Committee. Org fake name. Fake domain? Dad chuckled darkly. She's trying to scare you. Don't flinch. Lainey narrowed her eyes. I'm not scared. I want round two. We gave Lainey everything: the smear site, the purchase order, the vandalism footage, even the photo from Willowben. She did her homework. Within 48 hours, she dropped a second segment: HOA fraud, the fight for Wisteria, Glen Part 2. And this time she named Karen and her entire family. By that Friday, the police issued a warrant for Brett. He was arrested during a traffic stop, the same SUV from the auction, fake badge on the seat, but Karen's still missing. Until Sunday, Elijah was walking Bandit, our neighbor's golden retriever. The sun was setting. He was 1 block from the park. That's when the black SUV pulled up slow behind him. The door opened. Karen stepped out. No makeup, no clipboard, just fury in her eyes and something clutched in her coat pocket. She didn't see Dad's truck idling behind a tree across the street, didn't see the sheriff's deputy waiting 2 houses down, didn't know Elijah had an emergency button on his phone linked directly to us. He pressed it. She lunged. Dad reached her first. Karen didn't go quietly. The second Dad grabbed her arm. She started shrieking. Not word, just this high, animal scream like a fire alarm set off in a house with no escape. She fought like someone cornered nails, elbows, knees. She went for Elijah, too. Tried to get the coat open. Later, we found the taser she'd hidden under it, but she never had a chance to use it. Dad had her on the ground in 2 seconds, 1 knee on her shoulder, calling calmly for backup. By the time the sheriff's deputy ran up, Elijah was crying not out of fear, but from the shock of it all catching up to him. And me, I was just standing there, frozen, watching this woman, the source of every bit of poison in our neighborhood, finally caught. Who do you think you are? She spat at Dad as they cuffed her. He didn't answer, just handed over his ID. The deputy blinked, then smiled. Thank you for your service, sir. We'll take it from here. Karen was charged with harassment, attempted assault with a deadly weapon, impersonation of a public official, and conspiracy to commit fraud. That last one stuck the hardest. Brett rolled on her in less than a week. Turns out, the whole HOA thing had been a front. They were using it to levy fake fines, enforce non-existent rules, and quietly steer certain families out of the neighborhood. Families like ours. Families who didn't look like Karen, or pray like Karen, or talk like her friends at the country club. They even had records showing their little patrols were targeting single moms, immigrants, and families with teens on skateboards. Sound familiar? Yeah, the fallout was fast and loud. News trucks came back. The local city council held a public forum, and for the first time in a long time, everyone showed up. Neighbors who had been silent stood up and spoke. One woman, Mrs. Patel, admitted Karen had fined her $400 for unapproved holiday decorations. Another guy said Karen told him he wasn't visibly Christian enough to qualify for the 4th of July block party. It was all out now. By week's end, the sheriff issued a formal statement. There is no recognized HOA authority in Wisteria Glen. Any further attempts to enforce policies or fines under that pretense will be treated as fraud. Elijah took a while to bounce back. He had nightmares for a bit, sometimes flinched when a car slowed near the curb. But Dad and I worked on that, and then came the day that told me he'd really turned a corner. It was when he asked to speak at the town meeting. He stood in front of 100 people, held up his broken skateboard, the one Brett had snapped, and said, "They wanted to break us, but all they did was show us who really stands with us." People clapped, some cried. Me, I cried after. The best part, Lainey Cruz's final segment aired a week later. Justice in Wisteria, how a community fought back against fake power. She ended it with Elijah's speech, and a shot of Dad walking out of City Hall in full uniform, flanked by half the neighborhood, white, black, Latino, Asian, all standing behind him. The footage went viral. For the first time, we were the story, not the victims, but the fighters, and no one could rewrite it this time. 2 months later, the lot where Karen's house once stood was empty. She sold it in a panic. Cash deal, left town before sentencing. Rumor is she tried to start another residential order in Arizona and got shut down fast. I don't care if she ever shows her face again, but I do care about what we built in her absence. The neighbors started a real community group, not an HOA, just residents helping residents. Potluck dinners, weekend projects, emergency support. They even asked Dad to lead it. He declined, said he'd rather leave that to the future. Then turned to me. I don't know what I'll do next. Maybe law school, maybe community advocacy. But one thing's certain: if anyone comes into our neighborhood again thinking they can bully, threaten, or intimidate their way into power, they'll have the whole block to deal with. Because we remember now, and we're not afraid anymore. What would you do if a fake authority tried to control your neighborhood? Share your thoughts below. Let's talk about the line between power and abuse, and how communities can fight back when silence no longer works.